Hello, you malty. Mystical, misty moments make malts. There you go. That's a malt mention. And I do need to provide a malt mention credit to Tony Waters, 737, for getting this review started. Now, before we go any further, I'm Ralphie. This is the Bothy. This is a home for online in-depth whisky reviews, and this is review number 1017. And in this review I am having my first public sharing of opinions on a new young Scotch single malt distillery on the Isle of Skye called Chorravaike. Now, you can pronounce it Torabeg, right? Chorravaike, Chorravaike, however you want to pronounce it, so long as other people understand, it's just fine. Don't worry too much about the technicalities. This is the Altglen Legacy Series cask batch strength, they call it. Bottled at 61.1% alcohol, so it's a bit of a bruiser, particularly the fact that it's heavily peated and young, so the phenolic component is very much intact. And as you would expect from a young single malt Scotch whisky distillery, at the moment the product's young. With peated whisky, that youthfulness can come across as very intense, slightly rough, edgy, and a little bit uncomfortable for the palate, even for experienced whisky drinkers. And to a certain extent, we have that here. If you are a serious Scotch whisky single malt fan, you're going to love this stuff, particularly if you've got a real peat head on you. I'm going to read some of the information off the back of the label here because it's genuinely informative and very much a sign of contemporary modern whisky presentation, as we would expect to see, particularly from new distilleries, as they separate themselves from the more banal presentations of the corporate multinationals. So here we have, and I quote, heavily peated single malt whisky made from concerto malted barley with an in-grain phenol content of 78 plus parts per million. They call it ppm. Fermented with Pinnacle MG plus yeast and aged in a mix of first fill bourbon barrels and refill whisky barrels, bottled without reduction at 61.1% with no chill filtration or colouring, and a residual phenols level of 22.8%. 22.8 parts per million. Now, this is great information. For the modern whisky fan, this is absolute gold dust, this, because they're giving you the original parts per million, which they get as the reading from the maltings factory, where the peat is, the barley is peated during the kilning process. And they also, as well as giving you the before reading of 78 parts per million, they give you the after reading of 22.8 parts per million, which is highly unusual for any Scotch whisky producer to do. So we're getting real anorak level information here, and this tends to get kind of supported by going online and doing a little search for videos on YouTube for Chorravaike Distillery. It's a repurposed farmhouse, a historical building, which has been sensitively reinvented as a small farmhouse-style distillery. Everything's very compact, everything's very in-house, and the location is absolutely beautiful. It's quintessentially Highland, West Highland Island location. On the Isle of Skye, just north of Armadale, south of the Skye Road Bridge. You can't miss it. I mean, there's not a lot of roads in Skye. And this also happens to be Isle of Skye's second legal distillery after Talisker, which is much further north, because Skye's a big island, by the way. If you ever go to Skye, it's one of the largest islands off the west coast of Scotland, and it's surprisingly large, although you will find it quite a desolate place. And this is primarily due to very heavy depopulation during the Highland clearances, which has left the island with a certain feel to it, which is hard to pin down unless you really know the depth and the honesty of the history, rather than received narratives that we get through the education system. But there we go, it's just what it is. So I'm really, as a Scotsman, delighted to see the more rural areas which are significantly overlooked for investment, particularly in the culture in Britain in the 21st century, which is really not supportive for actual production of stuff and things, because it's such a financially based society in terms of the industry coming out of London. So it's all good. What I would recommend you to do is, if you're a real peathead and if you've got a budget, buy a bottle of it. But it's still young whiskey. So if you're an occasional whiskey drinker, keep this in your radar for coming to and approaching in a couple of years' time, because it's still young malt, and I think that it's a little bit rough round the edges. Let me explain. On the nose, quite biting. There's a slight English mustard yeast note on the nose. It's rather simple. It's not particularly complex. But the authenticity of what we expect from a modern heavily peated whiskey is most certainly there in spadefuls. So for the malt, for the peat heads, you're going to love the nose. First taste, and bear in mind this is very young. I wouldn't put this any more than about 6 years old, bearing in mind that the distillery actually started producing in 2017, which is just over 6 years ago. Very fresh. Very young. You really feel it in the heat through the development into the finish, and that's really in first connection, or on first point of reference, because I'm sipping it neat and I haven't added any water. So let me do that right now. As you can appreciate, it's young whiskey, it's heavily peated. I'd recommend a reasonable amount of water to bring it down. A couple of drops isn't going to cut it. So I've added about 8 millilitres of water to a standard 250 millilitre, 25 ml measure. That's probably near 30 actually. Unchill filtered, natural colour. There's the colour, as you can see. It's all good. You can see by the colour that because it's natural, it's revealing, so that you can see the presence of first fill casks, a combination of first fill bourbon casks, but also of ex-whiskey casks. So in fact, they are supplementing, when they're using whiskey casks, it means they're using casks that previously contained Scotch whiskey. So they can sort of supplement the identity and start to kind of round off the youthfulness with the maturity of the previous content whiskey from the casks that they're using for maturation. So this is all part of the kind of arts and crafts business of making whiskey. Typical modern small distilleries, they do not have the luxury of waiting too long, unless they've got particularly deep pockets, which I doubt it. So this is, it's quite feisty stuff. I was looking at other people's reviews before I reviewed this. I never looked too closely because I want it to be, I want my own opinion to be as uninfluenced as possible, but I noticed a few high marks out there. And I think it's really, these are marks of passion by people who just love heavily peated whiskey, where you're getting, you know, that face slap nippiness. What I'm noticing from the half a dozen glasses that I've had so far is that it needs more time. But with more time, it's really going to sparkle. So this is one I would recommend to the absolute enthusiast. What I don't want is to give this a big high mark and then the more inexperienced whiskey buyer who's looking for the new peat monster to talk about in Reddit and Discord and Facebook forums, buys a bottle and ends up a little bit disappointed. You know, there are many other better value heavily peated whiskies out there, including Lechake, 10-year-old, standard 10-year-old. But for the real enthusiast, you go for it, because I'm going to tell you why. This bottle can last years, absolutely years. So you may buy the young version, and then in 2 or 3 years' time, you'll buy the more mature version. And then, having this bottle, you can have them side by side for comparison to get direct bearings on the practical influence of time in cask affecting maturation. And it's all very well getting the explanations, malt mates, but I'm telling you, it's your own palate, your own taste, your own smell. That is what's your ultimate guidance in this. And there's nothing better than direct, practical, personal experience. So that's a distinct reason why I would recommend you buy this bottle. So I've given it a couple of minutes in the glass now with a reasonable amount of water. Let's go back to the nose. Now we're getting a little bit more yellow fruits. So I'm getting some melon, lemon, definitely a lemon juice. A little touch of grapefruit. Pink grapefruit, funnily enough. It's got that slightly kind of fruity side to it. And I'm really noticing a distinct sour grain bitterness as well in the nose, which is really quite old school. And I have to say, a bit off-putting for many modern palates, which are over-engineered to be, as consumers, to be consuming sugary stuff, which oversweetens your palate in terms of references. So the taste, and again, this is cask strength, it's high strength, young, peated, heavily peated whiskey. Oh, huge improvement in the arrival. Now we're getting the chimney soot, a distinct chimney soot note, and what they call the peat reek, so the reekiness of it, that sort of slightly iodine infused intensity, which really prickles the tongue. It's there in spadefuls, and not an awful lot in the development. It's clean, fresh enough. A little bit of mild pineapple, yellow honeydew melon, that kind of lemon juice, sour lemon juice, grapefruit, slight ruby grapefruit note kind of mingled together. And a little bit of gingeriness as well. Pickled ginger, you know, the ginger that you get with your little packet of sushi that's lying in the bottom, and it's always delicious. You never throw that away. But you've got that little touch of green pickled ginger in there, which is definitely something which contributes to the character and tends to hang in there over time during maturation in casks. And it's so far so good. Leaving it, by the way, when you leave it, it will continue to kind of morph in the glass, and you will get a slight unpleasant note of butyric. Now, I'm picking my words carefully here because I'm really enjoying this stuff, but part of the sign of an underaged, raw, heavily peated whiskey is you get that kind of rancio, buttery type baby clothes notes, and it can be a little bit off-putting. It can come across as an off-key in the harmonious chord of the flavour delivery. But what I recommend is just keep giving it more time. More and more time, it will settle down. It will open up. This shows great promise. It's not just the promise of the fact that they're transparent in the information they're providing, which they know we want to know. So they're respecting us with that, which is important, very important. But they're confident in what they're doing. They're not trying to over-engineer their whiskey, although I do suspect that they're producing clear wort, which in my opinion reduces the slightly yeastiness, the yeasty notes in it, which is not a good thing. It isn't, particularly over time, because if you've got active casks, you need an active immature spirit for active casks to bond with. Otherwise, the casks over time overwhelm the spirit more quickly, and it starts to lose that balance between the spirit and cask more quickly. But keep an eye on this one. They will shortly be bottling later this year in 2024 a sherried version, which is going to be well worth looking out for, because when you're a small distillery with access to experience within the industry, you're going to be very, very, very careful how you source your casks, and you're going to focus on the quality of those casks, which is vital. And I do mean vital, for establishing a young, fledgling distillery such as we have here. But I do suspect, I've not visited it, I've not visited the distillery, there's plenty of time for that. I'm kind of rather busy, as you know. But eventually, when I do get there, what I expect to find is something that is sincere, honest, charming, engaging, and immediate. Full of personality. That's what I expect. And I expect, like most distilleries, it's the people themselves that really make it. And West Coast Island folk tend to be practical, self-depreciating, and don't flannel you with sanctimonious BS that you can come across in some other more established distilleries, unfortunately. And that is very, very refreshing. One final thing I would finish on before I give the malt mark. In fact, no, I'll give the malt mark first. One final taste. The creaminess is coming through. A sweet, creamy cereal note. Almost oat cakey. It's bright. That mustard, remember I mentioned English mustard earlier? It's definitely prominent, and it's a touch of Dijon mustard as well. So it's there is that kind of mustardy note coming from the grain itself. Very interesting. I'm going to give this, it is young, it's still got a way to go. I'm not going to over-egg this pudding, right? 83 out of 100, that's a malt mark. Now, one thing I want to conclude this review on is, how do you get the lid off this? Right. This is the way it's presented, with a long-sided lid which is tight. So you're trying to get the lid off and you're really struggling, and you go to the corner of the lid and you try to pull, right? Particularly when you're trying to get off for the first time, it's extra clingy. Here's what you do, right? Put the hand on, right, with your nails under the lid, tug, turn it, tug, turn it, tug, turn it, tug, turn it, tug, and then you'll get the lid off. Once you've got this lid off, take my advice, don't put it back on. It's too big and it's too tight. There we go. I'm Ralphie. This has been a Ralphie review of a new distillery in Scotland. There are many of them. I'm not going to do too many of these reviews because I don't like to review too much of what's not generally available globally. I need to mix it up. I need to kind of pick and mix, so I've got some real variety in these reviews. So you won't be seeing any more new distillery reviews for a little while. So we're going to be well into the year before I introduce another single malt from a new distillery. This year we are going to see so many strangers sitting on the shelves of your specialist whisky shop. But you have a mobile device. It's going to be very easy for you to get ratings, opinions and perspectives. And of course, most importantly, as the corporate in the big players remove themselves from selling their product through the specialist high street independent retailers, because frankly it's inconvenient to the accountants. It makes space for these new distilleries, and once you're bored of looking at the stacks, the soldier-like stacks of a generic whisky that you see in travel retail or on Amazon or in your supermarket, particularly Tesco, it's the worst by far now. What I recommend is you just go online, look at the specialist online retailers, and importantly the ones that you can walk in off the street and stand there and chat to people who know about the whisky they are selling. And go at a quiet time, so don't go on a Saturday morning, go on a weekday afternoon, mid-afternoon, when it's a little bit quieter, have a chat to these people, and don't forget to ask them, what do you recommend? What do you think I should buy? Any chance of a wee taster? Because see, when you're in a position where you can taste and try before you buy, it's amazing how that secures a sale. And also, it's amazing how it cultivates a reputation of a new fledgling distillery. Just saying. I'm Ralphie, thank you for watching. Do leave a comment, click like, subscribe and all the rest of it. And I do have a Patreon channel, a busy one with its own little Discord community as well. Yeah, things are developing. I can't commit to introducing artificial intelligence to this channel. I know it's looking a little bit old-fashioned, but hey-ho, I don't particularly care. I like it that way, and that's the way it's going to stay for a while. Thanks for watching.